I hope so. Can
All
can
right.
everyone hear me?
Excellent.
Yay.
All right. Paige says the recording has begun. First off, before we begin, hello, everybody. Welcome. As this is the first live lecture style panel of the year, I will just remind that the etiquette is to please hold your questions until the end. Chai and I will be reading from a pre-written script. We will not be able to follow chat effectively until the end. There is a Q&A portion. Do not worry, we will get to you. Second of all, I am putting a link to our script in panel question just so it's not buried. For anyone who has audio processing issues or otherwise just wants to follow along, we tried to make our text colors different brightnesses in case there's anyone colorblind in the audience so that our text can be told apart. If you can't, I'm sorry.
We tried so hard.
We tried very hard. All right. With that being said, let us begin the panel. Not humans, still people. How inhumanity interacts with personhood. Greetings, assembled people and creatures of Othercon. Welcome. My name is Goratrix bani Tremere. You may know me from previous panels, you may not. I am the co-host of the Draconic Wizard Workshop system and a vampire. Additionally, I have a dragon archetype. As you may expect, my relationship with humanity is quite complicated. My relationship with personhood, however, is not. That is what this panel is about, and to discuss it, I am joined by one of my lovely partners.
Hi. I am Chaiya Askari-Vykos. I'm the co-host of the Treehouse system. I am a vampire. I'm Goratrix's boyfriend. And I am a part-time dragon. My relationship with my humanity is fairly straightforward, for a vampire, that is. But my dragonkin type makes my relationship with personhood a bit more complicated than I ever expected that it would.
We wanted to do this panel together to explore personhood and to disconnect it from being equivalent to humanity. As you can tell, we both have fairly complex relationships with humanity, both due to our vampirism and our draconidy, so we've had lots of cause to think about it. There has also been an uptick of those not wanting to be referred to as people due to not wishing to be connected to being human, and even requests for dehumanization. And we thought it best to deconstruct what personhood is and what it can mean to those of us familiar with being non-human and or alter-human. After all, most people consider personhood strictly in the context of humanity. But those of us who do not strictly experience only humanity have an advantage when considering personhood in many contexts and from multiple angles. We want to discuss how species identity, both human and non-human, interacts with personhood. We want to discuss non-person identities and how they interact with each of us being people. We also want to discuss what it means to be a different kind of person in an identity, how that interacts with your present personhood, and how being inhuman in an identity, especially a species or individual with morals and tendencies that most humans find repulsive or unacceptable, can teach us much about personhood and how to perceive ourselves in our present lives.
So, to make sense of any of what we're aiming to talk about, we need to establish what a person is. Everyone probably has their own definition of a person, but according to the Oxford Dictionary, which is what Google uses to provide definitions, a person is a human being regarded as an individual. Now, yes, all humans are people, that's not in question, but here at OtherCon, where many people aren't human, we know that's not the most inclusive of definitions. The Wikipedia definition is a bit more broad, stating that a person is a being who has certain capacities or attributes, such as reason, morality, consciousness, or self consciousness. But I think that the key here is consciousness. Consciousness is defined as awareness by the mind of itself and the world, which doesn't require the person to be human or to have a physical brain if that's not where you keep your mind. This allows personhood to include humans, vampires, dragons, computers, and anything else that can think, am I a person? Separate from personhood is humanity. Now, you're probably thinking, Chaya, you just said that. We get it, person doesn't mean human. I did say that. But when I say humanity, I don't mean human. As a vampire, I have to consider the difference because, biologically speaking, I'm not human. I was human once. I was born human, and I lived half my life as one, but I'm not human now. A human is, among many other things, a diurnal omnivore, which I'm definitely not. But I usually still feel like a human, for what that's worth, and I view morality through a mostly human lens, regardless of what I physically am. For vampires, at least the kind of vampire that I am, humanity is not inherent. It's something you choose, that you have to maintain. It's the set of morals, a code of ethics, one that I still follow, though not as strictly as some would like me to. Because of this, I still have my humanity, but my humanity is not what makes me a person.
Essentially, a person is a being that can make choices. Yes, certainly a moth or a bird can choose which direction to fly or look for food, but I mean thoughtful choices with a concept of cause and effect. A person can look at information and assess what is the most likely to get them the result they want, and choose it, and look back later and determine whether or not that was the correct decision. A person's choices can come with morality, while a non person's cannot. Your average dog biting someone is a morally neutral action. After all, they're a dog, and their understanding of morality is limited. However, your average person biting someone is typically an action with moral ramifications. Perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it's in self defense. Or perhaps it was in response to minor annoyance, and may be interpreted accordingly based on your own moral views. One could say that a person is partially defined by their capacity for good and evil. I personally reject both concepts, as in my mind, morality is nothing more than differences in prioritization, but I will discuss that in greater detail later on. Furthermore, a person can create, whether that be thoughts, art, concepts, tools, writing, abstract communication. People make things. Many non people make things as well. But is that not what makes humans look at some animals and call them, quote unquote, more intelligent than others? Are elephants and corvids not regarded as more intelligent than mice because of complex reasoning skills and ability to use, or in some cases make, tools? As a result of all of this, you are a person. I reject the concept of being able to remove it from oneself as one would a label. Certainly, if you specifically ask me not to call you a person, I will follow your wishes, as that is only right. However, I do not think that insisting that you are not a person, in a desperate attempt to avoid humanity, is the right choice. You can think, you can choose, you can reason, you can create, and you can weigh your moral options. Rejecting your humanity is fine, whether that be rejecting being human, or, as Chai discussed, rejecting the approximate moral structure of most humans. Rejecting your personhood, however, has pitfalls.
Rejection of personhood and the similar but different humanizing of the self are things I've seen pretty frequently in the ultrahuman community. Therians, dragonkin, objectkin, and more, rejecting not only their humanity, but being a person at all. And it makes sense. Most of us here have a complicated relationship with being human, whether it's just being a different kind of human or being something else entirely. And personhood, while different, has been so closely woven with being human that they seem synonymous. It's easy to tie them together and throw away the whole damn tangle. Cut away the strings, and you're completely divorced from humanity. I'll admit, I understand the appeal. My dragon self isn't human, and it's not a person either. During strong shifts, I don't feel like a person. The things that usually make me feel like a person, complex emotions and thought, consideration of and compassion for others, strong interests outside of the most basic instinctive desires, are significantly dulled. My headmate, Nico, a Komodo dragon therian, experiences the same thing. On occasion, when someone else is in the front to take the lead, they've even experimented with temporarily giving up higher thought, letting go of acting like a person at all. It can be so freeing to not have to be a person, but it is temporary. It's not a state that can be maintained forever, and they wouldn't want it to be because they enjoy their personhood and what it grants them. Even if they didn't, personhood isn't something you can just give up for good, and it's certainly not something that you want to lose. Human history has countless examples of groups being denied personhood, and I'd bet that most intelligent species who have ever experienced conflict can say the same. Denial of personhood is a weapon, a malicious othering that's used to silence and even kill those it's turned against. It's something we see every day: racism, religious persecution, sexism, queerphobia, leading to injustices that range from wage gaps to genocide. It is the denial that we are intelligent, that we feel pain, that we have worth, that we deserve to live. It is something that should be feared, not coveted. It's not something that you can choose, it's chosen for you, and it is never with your best interest in mind. So, by all means, embrace your moments of not feeling like a person, but be grateful that you are one and for what a gift it is. Be grateful for what it gives you and what it protects you from. And just as importantly, be wary of denying personhood to others. Sometimes, in distancing yourself from something, you see it as less than, too complex or too simple to be worth your time or your respect. Maybe it just doesn't make sense to you, or you find it unpleasant. When we distance ourselves from typical humanity, it can be easy to fall into viewing humans as lesser. They aren't. They're people with thoughts and feelings and inherent worth, just like us. We don't have to understand or even like them, but we cannot lose sight of their personhood. The pieces that make up a person, pieces that all of us have, are things that we share with all humans, and that is worthy of respect.
Now that we have well and truly defined what a person is and why you should consider yourself one, let us ask ourselves, what can being non human teach us about personhood? I would like to raise that we have already learned something essential. It has already taught us that personhood is not the same as humanity, and that the concept of a person can exist wholly independently of being human. It is frequently a human centric word and definition, due to the only people that many humans are aware of being human. But as you well know, others are out there, in us. What else can we learn? Let us first look at other people while seeking answers. Many of us here are fictives or have a type of some description that is a non human person. Elves, vampires, aliens, some dragons, and many, many others. These people may live in complex societies or may live largely alone, but they are people with their own cultures and moral structures, their own ideals and arts and histories. I think one thing we can learn from this is acceptance for other cultures. Not only those from other worlds, but those in the world we live in now. If you spend your time getting to understand, say, your Dragonheart type, where the cultural expectations may look very different than what you are used to, collecting gold, terrorizing mortals, fancy flying, interesting dances, whatever it may be, then it is easier to meet a human from an unfamiliar culture that may be more similar to the one that you have grown up in this life than the one that you have been exploring and learning about through Noemata. Indeed, we may learn to accept each other more easily as well. Is it not easier to accept a vampire whose nighttime society encourages nightly murder and manipulation when you are used to your own backstabbing alien culture that comes to you in flashes when you meditate? Do you not have some compassion for the situation that they come from and some understanding that some behavior is not entirely their fault? I would raise this again as well. To me, arguments over differing morality are nothing more than differences in prioritization. Perhaps your friend's orcish culture values honor and proving oneself in battle more than they value the lives of other cultures, and perhaps your elvish one values life above all else and would find this kind of behavior barbaric. Neither is better than the other. Neither is objectively right. And both believe that they are doing what is good and right by upholding their cultural moral values in the face of opposition. Is there not something to learn here when you discuss this with someone whose alter-human identity is very different from yours? I believe that having a connection to a non-human, but still a person, identity allows one to get a better perspective on the culture in which one was raised. Perhaps less valuable for fictives, but valuable for those who are their headmates. This lets you look critically at your own culture and moral values and ask, why? Why is this what I value? Why is this what we do? You can learn much about yourself and the people around you by comparing and contrasting cultures. And this gives us a fairly unique perspective by allowing us to compare whatever culture we have physically been born into to whatever culture has been provided to you to compare via your identity. Finally, non humanity can teach us much about instinct. How much time in the alter human and non human communities are spent talking about non human instincts? Growling, flexing claws, flaring wings, snorting, pawing at the ground, stalking squirrels. Yet these do not have to derive from non-person sources. How many dragons have a prey drive? How many vampires bare their teeth and snarl? Non-human instincts do not take your personhood away. They do not make it any less a part of you, or any less valuable. This can make you aware of how you differ from a human, but it can also bring attention to what a human's instincts are, as you either have them despite your non-human identity, or lack them, and either must mimic them to fit in, or accept that humans will see you as unusual. However, this awareness of instincts can also derive from a non-person source. A wolf still has a prey drive. A cat still hisses. A bird may still be driven to dive and snatch up a rabbit. Non-person types have much to teach us as well, both about instinct and about where the line between person and non-person may be drawn.
As someone with multiple sets of instincts spanning the three categories of human, non human, and non person, I can honestly say that a lot of them overlap. If you are a being that needs to consume nourishment, you probably have an instinctive drive to find food, and you have that in common with every other beast that needs to eat. The specifics differ widely enough to have subtypes, of course. Herbivores don't typically have prey drives, after all, but at the heart of it, it's the same instinct. All facets of my identity come with a chase instinct, and despite the differences, they all feel just about the same in the moment. The still human part of me, the omnivore, is just as able and willing to hunt as the carnivorous dragon and the sanguivorous vampire. The key difference between my person and non person instincts lies in my ability to think about them. Two of these sets stem from a thinking, feeling being. The instincts can usually be tempered or worked around if I want to, and if I give in to them in an inappropriate situation, I stop and think about it afterwards. After all, just because something is instinctive doesn't mean that it's the right move. If I give in to my instinct to chase down a surrendered and fleeing opponent because I now recognize them as prey, that's wrong of me, even though it feels like I need to. Baring my fangs and hissing at someone isn't polite, no matter how annoying I think they are. My human instinct to explore and indulge my curiosity is fairly harmless until I get caught trespassing. These are all instincts that make up the most basic parts of how I interact with the world, but they don't rule me. My non person instincts, on the other hand, are what drive my dragon self. There's no questioning whether it's the best time to act on them. It simply does. It hunts what it wants to, whenever it wants to. There's no care about if the fish it's about to catch is heading towards its breeding grounds and would be better eaten later after it has taken part in making sure that there will be more fish to eat next year. It doesn't think about whether something else will take offense to it snooping around in their territory, and wouldn't care if they did. It's not a very territorial beast, Dragon Me. It moves around too much to give a shit about my space versus your space. Its instincts aren't something it ever wonders about, ever contemplates fighting, and it doesn't really need to. There's nothing beyond those instincts for it to worry about, even if it could. Neither set of instincts is better or worse than the other, but they're certainly very different.
Now, welcome to the vampirism example. We're going to be here for a while, so settle in.
Ooh, here we go.
I believe it may be best from this point to discuss what can be learned from being non human in the case of specific and easily comparable examples. Chai and I are both vampires, and we interpret that identity very differently, and have learned much about personhood from both our own experiences and from hearing about each other's. I, myself, do not identify as human anymore. On the night when I transformed myself and the rest of the Tremere leadership into vampires during a ritual, I ceased to be human and became vampire instead. I had been sinking deeper and deeper into a kind of inhuman anger and depression, a rage and self-hatred for many years. It was an emotional metamorphosis that reached its pinnacle when I became a vampire, and with the anger that was directed at me for the ritual for years after. I left my being human, and indeed every scrap of humanity I could get away from me, behind, and embraced, if you'll pardon the pun, the vampiric lifestyle. It suited me better, given that I had become prone to distrust, suspicion, and paranoia, and had little interest in doing feel good things for people, and far more in gathering power to protect myself and those I considered my subordinates from future harm. Do you understand? I became non human and inhuman in one single stroke. The name of this panel is no mistake. I am interested in how non humanity interacts with personhood, but so too am I interested in inhumanity, sets of behaviors that are non human or even antithetical to humanity. I ceased to be human because I did not want to be human anymore, and physically I had become something else, which granted me an escape. I did not like the way I had been treated by the humans around me, and I did not know what to make of that behavior. It got worse, inhuman, over time once we were vampires, but then I could understand it. All of a sudden, it clicked, and I could defend myself from it by turning away from humanity, reprioritizing my moral structure, and becoming someone who will defend my underlings because it is my responsibility, but who cares little for the suffering of unaffiliated people. They are not my responsibility. Why bother? This stance is one that has broken down somewhat since I came into the system, hence my series of panels intended to help people. My reasons for wanting to do this, I can only speculate at. And yet, and yet, my personhood has never once been in question. I turned my back on my own humanity because I became a creature, a predator of the night, something that defends its own and ignores the needs of all else. And yet, I'm still a person. Once upon a time, I would have defined personhood in a very human centric way, and indeed, I do not believe that I thought once about my personhood outside of my humanity until I had thrown the latter away almost completely. But my non humanity does not change that I am a thinking, feeling person, one able to make moral decisions and weigh my options. And perhaps even more important, neither does my inhumanity. My rejection of myself as human, although I am no misanthrope, do not misunderstand me, as well as most moral prioritizations that your average human finds permissible. I have no conscience, only conviction, but that does not remove my personhood. I have been called beast and monster and devil in source, but despite that, despite all of my deeds, I am a villain after all. Despite my morality and my convictions and my strange, twisted loyalties, I am a person, and that is more complex than I ever could have believed in my youth.
My experience with vampirism was very different. My life as a human was pretty good. Everything was falling into place, even if it wasn't entirely there yet. I was a completely mundane PhD student, no connection to the supernatural whatsoever. Before I was embraced, I never would have even entertained the thought of actual vampires. And then, one night, I woke up as a monster. I was completely removed from my human life, both physically and mentally. I was taught to give in to the instincts of this new, dangerous predator I'd been turned into. An animal that only wanted to hunt the very people I'd once belonged to. I became a weapon, and that hunger was honed to a fine point to be used against others and against myself. It was easy then to stop feeling like a person. I pulled myself together eventually, built and rebuilt the drive to run away again and again, and I did it. I got out. There was no one to wield me against the world anymore. I could be my own person. But I had no idea how to mesh who I'd been with who I became. I couldn't go back to my old life and didn't have a life as a vampire outside of the one I'd just left. So I drifted. I killed for cash because that was all I knew how to do. I looked for contracts and bounties for the scummiest vampires I could take on, because if I had to be a weapon, then I was at least going to turn myself against people I wanted to kill. People who used their powers for manipulation and torment and careless murder. And that gave me something to latch on to, something to ground myself with. I didn't have to be a monster, not the way they were. I could be, if I wasn't careful, but I could control myself. I could fight the instincts, fight the hunger. I could be better than what I was cursed to be. It wasn't until several years after that, when I'd finally found a place to belong, found people I could be comfortable with, people I could love, that it clicked. There was never any monster. The thing I spent so long suppressing was just a cornered animal, scared and hungry and lashing out at anything that came too close. There was nothing wrong with me, nothing that being embraced had fundamentally ruined, nothing that I had to make up for. The actions I've taken and the choices I've made over the years changed me, of course. The experiences I have had shaped me just as much as they would any human. But those experiences don't define me. I can decide what I want for myself and make the changes necessary to achieve it. It's my choice, and what I've chosen is humanity. Humanity isn't for everyone, and what it means varies person to person. But for me, the humanity I've decided to keep means compassion and understanding. It means putting the least amount of hurt into the world that I can reasonably manage. It means helping others when I can, because I can. Humanity is the path that I believe will lead me to do the best that I can from my world. And even if I slip, I know I can keep coming back to it. I haven't lost it, and I won't let it be taken from me because it is my choice.
To follow that up, I wish to emphasize something that I feel we mostly know, but I cannot leave unsaid. Being inhuman or non human is not better or worse than being human. Being both is not better or worse than being only one. Being something other than human is morally neutral. Having a different set of moral priorities than most humans you know is not inherently wrong. Perhaps they may view it as so, but we can only ever judge ourselves by our own standards, not anyone else's. And remember, you do the best you can with the information you have in the circumstances you are in. People rarely do something they consider wrong for what they believe to be the wrong reasons. And simply being is not wrong. Being is never wrong. Please remember this.
Humanity has never been the end all and be all of personhood. No matter where humans think personhood ends, nor where some of us in the alter human community think it does. Personhood does include us inherently. We don't have to meet their standards of humanity to rightfully claim what is part of us. We don't have to conform to some rigid little mold with all of our differences neatly tucked away and hidden for fear of being not human. And we don't have to throw ourselves as far away from personhood as we can stand just to validate those differences. we deserve to still call ourselves people, to claim what that gift provides without having to sacrifice what makes us who we are. Inhumanity has a place in personhood. Animality has a place in personhood. Differences in the way we experience this world, the way we experience ourselves, does not take away from our personhood, and we shouldn't let it. Our personhood and all of the different ways we can be within it is not something others can take from us. It's not something we can give up, and we shouldn't feel like we have to. We should hold on to this beautiful thing we share that lets us even consider how amazingly different we all are.
God, I'm so glad I let you take the conclusion.
Thank you.
And now we transition from the lecture section of this panel to the Q&A. Please put all questions in the panel questions chat. If you put them in the regular panel chat, we will not see nor answer them. If your question is for a particular one of us, please lead your question with the correct name. We will do our best to answer all questions, but please remember that you are in front of a large audience. The peak I saw was 151,
Oh
and on
god.
a recording that will go up on YouTube. Please do not ask complex personal questions. You are exposing your personal details to many, many people, and we cannot hope to answer very personal questions with little context on the spot at a panel. If you would like our advice in a one-on-one format, shoot one of us a message about it privately after the Q&A. Being said, let's see, questions.
How am I a part-time dragon? That's a good question. No, I'm not cut off after like, so many hours. You're going into overtime. You have to clock out now. No, I typically only consider myself a dragon when I feel like one, which isn't consistent. It's in flux. So sometimes I'll say, oh yeah, no, I'm just a vampire, whatever. And sometimes I'm a dragon, and it feels different. So that's why I say part time. I'm not one of those overachieving full time dragons. I have no idea how any of you do it.
A few logistical questions which have largely been answered. Do vampires really not like garlic? That depends on the vampire.
I
It
love
also
garlic
depends on the
personally.
media. I love garlic. Sorry to
I have
vampires that
not
can't do
been
garlic.
yeah, I've not been cursed to not be able to eat garlic, which is nice. Very, very glad for that.
Oh,
Um,
that next question is definitely for you.
that's for me as hell. Okay, let's see.
Oh
Can
god, we're
I
up to
elaborate
154.
more? Oh no. Um,
Oh,
can I
thank you all.
can I elaborate more on the socio-political point about historical denial of personhood to marginalized groups still in action today? Yes, I could elaborate on that for days if you let me, but I'm not going to because we
Please only
only
take a
have
few
20 more
minutes.
minutes.
We have 20 minutes.
Yeah. Um, so typically, denial of personhood is referred to as dehumanization, which I didn't want to use a whole lot of because a lot of us aren't human, so that didn't really cover everything I was going for. But dehumanization has been very present in basically any uh, oppressive movement against a marginalized group, saying that, for example, I did mention this a little bit, the medical consensus that black people like felt pain less than white people, that's removing a part of their personhood to further your goals against them.
And it's bullshit.
It and it's bullshit. Yeah, absolutely. Like, goes without saying. That's not only is it bullshit from a social standpoint, but also from a biological standpoint. That makes no sense. Um, but things like that, things like saying that someone isn't enough like you to deserve the same rights that you have. That there's something wrong with them, and that can be capitalized on to get rid of them in whatever way that that ends up happening. Uh, Now the line between a conscious being and a person. Um,
I feel like that can't be clearly drawn personally. I feel like there's a gray area there.
yeah,
You could argue that a
that's
crow is a person.
you could, yeah. Or an octopus. I would argue that an octopus could be a person.
A lot of it is we just don't know, so I feel like making a clearly delineated line is not good, and I am also a hater of binaries. I hate binaries. Tear them down.
We don't need them. There's no point. Nothing is one or the other. It's ridiculous.
Could you discuss your thoughts on non-human versus inhuman a bit more? Whew, that's a vague question, I must admit.
That's
I
a whole other
suppose it
panel.
but in short, I feel as if inhuman is less of its own label or identity, and it's more of a modifier, I suppose. If you take a peek in a dictionary, inhuman is generally somewhat antithetical to human behavior or being human. I use it to, I suppose, emphasize behavioral differences and moral differences, and to reinforce that even if you do things that are bad by most human standards, you can still be considered a person. You could use non-human in most cases, but I'm using it also as a adjective. I think it's an adjective. I have a major in creative writing. You'd think I know what an adjective is, but I don't.
I can't help you. I always lose track of which is which, and I feel like I shouldn't. I have degrees in things. Not writing things, but things.
How are you doing? We're doing great. I'm having fun.
Have I considered being have I considered asking to be promoted to a full-time dragon? No. I'm too busy for that. I have other things to do.
Why are you all so good at panels? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's hard work and a lot of pacing. You have to pace. If you don't pace while writing your panel, that might be the secret spice.
Is that it?
Yes.
I wish you'd
Did you
told me
did you
that
not
earlier.
pace?
No.
Oh goodness, you should have. Then well, no, it's good you didn't. Otherwise, I would have been blown out of the water. You wouldn't have needed me.
No, I sat and wrote on my computer and shook like a chihuahua the entire time.
Question: so then, how exactly, in concrete definition, would you describe a person? I mean, I
I
think
don't
Chaiya had a section about that at the beginning, but I think a short, concrete definition is difficult.
Yeah, that's I think I don't know if there is exactly a concrete definition of a person because there's so many different variables that go into it. I think there's like prerequisites. Um but I
It's
don't know
sort
if
of
there's
like
a single definition.
can you define a woman in a way that includes all women and excludes all non-women?
Exactly.
Can you define a chair? I can't define a chair realistically in a way that includes all chairs and excludes all non-chairs. It's such a complicated and intrinsic thing that you kind of need multiple paragraphs, and even then it's unclear.
Concrete definitions are hard.
I feel a disconnection to personhood, not from denying it, but from feeling on a separate plane from it due to godhood. What are your thoughts in relation to this? My thoughts in relation to this is I have a headmate who is a god and he's nodding, which is the most anyone's ever really gotten out of him, so good job.
Hmm. Well, based on my godhead, mate, I would say that it. I mean, I guess it depends. I guess what it fully depends on how your godhood presents itself. I suppose concepts can be gods, and I don't know where those typically fall on the scale of personhood because I don't know much about that sort of thing. Um, so I guess that's one of those things that does depend on your personal experience, but I I'm going to get religious for a second, and I do apologize. I'm not going to specify anything, but it's said that in many religions it is said that humans, which we're not, but humans are people, are made by or in the image of their god, which I would assume that personhood would probably also be part of that. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense.
I think so. I don't know. That's a hard one.
All right, at this point, I'm sorry if you asked a funny question. We are running a little low on time, so I'm going to start skipping them.
Oh god. Oh no.
Look how many, their messages keep rolling in. Somebody help.
Oh, oh no.
Uh, as a follow-up, did you refer to any specific philosophers or other scholars while researching this panel? No, because my last panel had very heavy citations, and I hate it.
Yeah,
That's the real
I
answer.
the real answer for me is that I have cited too many things because I've written too many papers because we got a biology degree. I, I no, I'm not citing philosophers. I hate doing that. They will say anything, and I have to sit there and think about it. And I don't want to. The only philosopher here that I cited is myself, if you would like to think of me as such. That's it.
How do vampire alters deal with any vampire instincts? Much the same as any other alter human would deal with instincts. I would recommend looking into that if that's a question in the way of you needing help. If it's out of curiosity, it's much the same as anyone else who has a kind of instinct they need to handle.
If you have questions about specific vampire instincts, I would recommend messaging one of us later to talk about the specifics, and maybe we can help. I don't know,
hmm
but
I got blown away when I listened to the part of being a real vampire. This is possible, just like the style of life. We're both fictives,
oh
so
yeah,
we
we're
we come
fictives.
from another world essentially, and then ended up here. So it's real to us, but it's not real to you. We forgot to mention we were fictives. I'm so used to everyone knowing.
Oh my god, did I not include that?
We didn't say. We forgot. Oops. How did we do this?
Oh god. How many
Clowns.
people between our two systems have gone over this and we completely forgot to mention
Oh
that we're
god.
fictives? We're so good at this.
Uh, what are some good words to refer to those who aren't a person? I've seen folks get used, but it doesn't always work linguistically. I'd ask them. I, this is a problem I have as well. I don't know.
I yeah, no, I struggled a lot uh with wording for this specifically because of that. Entity or being I've seen used. But yeah, I would just ask whoever um case by case.
Could you elaborate more on your thoughts on ethics slash morality, as in what it is?
That's a college
uh,
semester.
it is. I'm
That's a
sorry. It's
degree.
basically I consider morality to be entirely subjective, and You may, for example, prioritize your own life over someone else's life, but some people would see that as being wrong, but you would see it as wrong for you to prioritize someone over yourself because you can no longer do the things you would do if you were to get hurt. It's I don't claim that my theory is correct. It's just what I use. It's what makes sense to me. You really could do panels and college semesters and lifetimes on morality and ethics and what is right and what isn't and is there good and evil in the universe. I've just sort of stuck to my guns and presented my theories as my own theories in my panels because at the end of the day, a panel I wrote is my opinion.
At the end of it all, we're really just two dudes giving our opinions on the internet.
I like to think of myself in more elegant terms, but yes.
Let's see, let's
Oh,
see.
there's a
Hmm?
hmm. I think you might have more thoughts on this one because I blank. Do you think there's a distinction between being biologically Homo sapiens slash hominid and being human?
Um, yeah, honestly, I do. I think that there are a lot more species than Homo sapiens who count as human, as you said, the hominids. And that evolutionary line, I think, would all be considered human based on the way that we define it today. And I also think that if you yourself find human to be what fits you best, the biology doesn't matter. If you are human because that is what you feel is right, then that's what you are. It's the same with anything else, most of us got going on here. If that's what feels right, that's what it is.
How can one become physically non-human? This is not my area. I
Um,
there
Someone
are
put blood in my mouth, personally. That's what happened to
for
me.
for me something happened to me back in source, but here there is a lot of writing about physical non-humanity. Avoid p shifters, but I that is not my area, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I have nothing. Apologies. You feel bad for Italian vampires. Oh, that's a whole other one as well. Luckily, I don't think most Italian vampires have the garlic allergy where we come from, and if they do, then that is one of God's little jokes. That is not nice. Oh, poor Italian vampires. Let's
One person
see.
asked, on the subject of a conversation that went on in chat, we feel that having personhood removed from oneself is generally an attack on them as beings, but one can choose to reject their own personhood if in it helps them. Would you agree? Why or why not? And there's actually a response to it from Daystar in chat, which I do want to highlight. In my opinion, rejecting your personal personhood is cool. However, renouncing it in a social or political context, at least right now, is fraught with actual danger, considering that the denial of personhood is currently a goal of several political parties around the world. Yes.
Daystar, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
In
Whether or
essence,
not
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Whether or not you personally identify as a person for whatever reason that you have for that, personhood is a need to be given rights in the world that we live in. Uh, Giving it up is not only something that I don't necessarily think that you can do, but outside of my opinion, that's just dangerous. There are hundreds of politicians across the world trying to say that you do not have personhood, and they are trying to take it away from you. And they are trying to Well, the things they're trying to do with to you via that, I'm not gonna get into right now because none of them are pretty, none of them are nice, none of them are things that any of us deserve. So I would be careful with that, if only because that would be putting yourself in the kind of danger that none of us wants to put ourselves into.
Ah, I got scroll down.
Oh
Where
no.
where was I? No. Ah, okay, there we are. In your views, is moral choice and responsibility inherently linked with personhood? Yes and no. I feel like there is theoretical room for these things outside of personhood, but I feel like you probably need them for personhood. Again, I I am a vampire with an opinion. So
Yeah,
feel free to
I
disregard me.
uh oh god. Yeah, no, that one's many answers to that question that would be very hard to condense in the next 4 minutes. Sorry.
Did you answer my question? We did answer your question, don't worry. Alright, is that all of them?
Oh my god, did we do it?
Does anyone have a last minute question? A serious last minute question? Please don't ask me about garlic. Did you have fun? Yes.
Yes. If there's any questions that you guys put in the panel chat that is not panel questions, go grab them and put them here. We did not I didn't look at that thing a single time in the last hour. We did not solve philosophy. Sorry
No.
guys.
I'm sorry, I don't have any particular further reading to recommend. I imagine someone in the panel chat might. I imagine we have someone familiar with perhaps religious studies that this might tie into, some that might have something. I don't know.
Mm.
Not to throw him under the bus.
Oh, how do you feel about the term being alterhuman? I like alterhuman actually. Um I think it's a good umbrella term. I think
Mhm.
it covers everything it really needs to. Um that I used it for a reason personally.
Do you guys have any opinions on the alter human community calling everyone in it beings rather than people? I personally find the word beings to be a little clunky and in some contexts a little pretentious. I know most people don't mean it that way. I don't personally like it. If you use it, great, but I don't like it.
Yeah, that's one of those ones that I'll use sometimes, but usually
If I know
only if someone doesn't want to be called a person.
Yes, exactly. If I know that I'm speaking to a crowd or many of the attendants don't want to be called people, I will adjust my language accordingly. It's respectful, but I don't like the word personally.
Um, Another question about vampiric urges. We mentioned this earlier. Um, those kinds of specifics you can message us about, and we can talk about that. But how do I deal with having vampiric urges? Well, it's taken about 20 years to figure it out pretty solidly, so I don't think I have time to
And
go into it.
and then you landed in another body and part of it got reset.
Oh god, yes.
Like I have it handled and then I show up somewhere where I'm expected to be diurnal and I'm like, good god, it's bright. Why is everything so green?
Good god, I'm white now.
Well, I that's the same for me.
Yeah.
My condolences. You're
Well,
different.
I
Not that
got
one is
different.
better than the other, but just
No, it's just
showing up in a
different.
body and being different is distressing, as I'm sure many of you know. I'm sure many of you are looking at your bodies and thinking, this isn't what I would have chosen, but all right. All right, well, it looks like we are just about at time. We are at time. So
We are at time.
thank you all for coming to the panel. I hope this was meaningful to you. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm very glad we did this. Thank you all. You've been a great audience.
Everyone's been so great, thank you. Oh, this was oh, this was fun. I liked this.
This was fun. All right, I will see all of you around the rest of the con. Thank you.